Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to Instant Deck Techs. In this series we go over everything you need to build a certain commander. We'll go over the strategies and the types of cards needed you need to get the deck working. Any cards we mention will be down in the description below. In this video we're going to be looking at Ziatora the Incinerator. It is 3 black, red, green for a 6/6 legendary creature demon dragon with flying. It also has, at the beginning of your end step you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, Ziatora deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target and you create 3 treasure tokens. Ziatora looks like a ton of fun. We're going to be playing big creatures and hurling them at our opponents. We'll then use the treasure that it makes from the creatures dying to help us cast even more big things so we can do it over and over again. Let's quickly go into a bit more detail on the game plan of this deck and importantly, how it wins. In this deck we're going to be running a combination of large creatures and effects that make creatures as big as possible. This is so we can sack them to Ziatora to deal a ton of damage to our opponents. We'll also use these large creatures to help draw us some cards with spells like Greater Good. First up is making those big threats. These are going to either be creatures or effects that put the most power onto the board as possible. The bigger the creature, the more damage we deal when we sack them to Ziatora. We're going to start firstly with big creatures that are cheap to cast but have some kind of downside. These are great and budget friendly and do everything that we need. Most of the time with these, the downside won't matter as we'll be sacking them at the end of turn anyway. After those are some cards that get themselves bigger throughout the game. Things die a lot in Commander. It won't just be the creatures we sack at the end of turn to Ziatora, people will have to block our big creatures, so that will all add to the pile. And then obviously there's the inevitable board wipes. This deck will take the most advantage out of all this, with cards like Bonehoard and Lord of Extinction. Bonehoarder especially is really good in the deck as you can equip it to creatures over and over again. There are also cards like Kresh that will sit there in the background getting absolutely huge, and then there's Death's Presence that will sit there making our next sack target bigger as well. We also have some cool cards that do things when they die which you can consider. Some of the dragons from the original and new Kamigawa can do a great job at giving us an evasive threat, which we can cash in with Ziatora to get even more value from them with their death triggers. And then we have cards that double up the power of a creature we control. It shouldn't be too hard to see that more damage is more damage, and these can let one of our creatures swing through for an absolute ton of it. Because Ziatora makes 3 treasures when we sack a creature to it at the end of turn, we can have a little treasure sub-theme in the deck as well. First up is cards like Xorn, Tireless Provisioner and Ruthless Technomancer. These either make us treasure or add to the amount of treasure that we can make. That treasure will keep us casting our big creatures turn after turn and helping out with our ramp. Then there is a card like Kalain, which buffs up the creatures we play equal to the number of treasure that was spent to cast it. We even get some nice win cons as well, with Magda being able to tutor out a huge dragon or a powerful artifact from our deck, and then we have Marionette Master, which with all the double power effects we can make absolutely huge, and then deal damage to an opponent whenever we cash in a treasure. Moving over to our ramp proper, we really want to make sure we have plenty of it, so that we can cast all those powerful spells. First up is creatures that come into play and get lands out of the deck. These will ramp us ahead and give us a body that we can sack for value. Even though they have very low power, they'll still make 3 treasure if we sack them to Ziatora. After those, we have our rampant growth effects that search through our deck and bring lands into the battlefield. As we're a 3-color deck, the spells that let you get non-basics, such as Farseek and 3 Visits, will be better, as they'll let us get any budget dual lands that we have from the deck. Moving over to our card draw, we're going to be taking as much advantage of having those large creatures on our side of the board. First up is enchantments like Elemental Bond and Garruk's Uprising, which will sit there and help us refill our hand so we can cast more large threats. Then there are cards that let us sacrifice a large creature and draw cards equal to its power. These are great at letting us draw a whole ton of cards in one go, that we can then use to kick on and win the game. Then we also have spells that just straight draw us cards equal to the power of the largest creature that we have. These are a bit more mana intensive than the previous cards, but we don't have to sacrifice a creature to use them. Another spell that can help with the card draw is Academy Manufacturer. When we make those 3 treasure off of Ziatora, with this out we'll also make 3 clue tokens, which we can cash in for some more card draw. And then there is Core Vault, which will sit there getting huge while drawing us cards whenever we sacrifice a treasure, a clue, or a creature. Moving over to our interaction, like with some of our other sections, we're going to want a lot of this to be on creatures, and then we can run some more efficient instant and sorcery speed based effects. There's plenty of creatures out there that can kill things. These will work in a similar way to those ramp creatures. They'll come in, they'll do their job, and then we'll cash them in either for some damage and some treasure or some card draw. Then we also get some of the most efficient instant speed bits of removal out there. There's plenty of options in Jund, so play the best ones that you have available to you. And then we also have some board wipes, with special note to Crux of Fate, which will keep our commander around, and Chandra's Ignition, which can keep our biggest threat around while hitting our opponents and all other creatures for a ton of damage. When it comes to protection, we do want to run a couple of bits to keep Ziatora around, mainly because it costs so much mana to recast. First up are spells that either protect our whole board with things like Heroic Intervention, or cards that make a creature harder to target with something like Swiftfoot Boots, which is nice as it can also give some of our big threats haste. There's also some cool things you can do with Undying effects. These bring a creature back if it dies in a turn. These can be used to save Ziatora, or can be used on one of our creatures we sack at the end of turn. This will bring the creature back, so we can sack it all over again next turn. I'll be honest, I don't think you need many of these, but I do really like this kind of effect in the deck. Next up is some Recursion. In the same vein as those Undying effects, it lets us use our powerful creatures all over again. There's plenty of options in Jund that we can use. I would generally look for effects that are repeatable, with a big shout out to Whip of Erebos, as that additional lifelink buff to our team can really help us stay alive. Moving over to our win cons, there's a couple of nice ways that we can close out a game. First up is with more big creatures, with cards like Malignus and Gulta Primal Hunger. These are some of the biggest things that we can cast, with Malignus in particular, combined with any double power effect, can directly take out an opponent. Next up is cards that give our team haste. This is so we can attack with our big threats the turn we play them, and then sack them straight away. I personally really like Anger, as it's very hard to interact with once it's online and in the graveyard. And then we also have Rhythm of the Wild, which also gives us the option to buff up the creature as well. Next we have some cards that in some way double up the damage that Ziatora can do. Mimic Vat and Flame Shadow Conjuring can both copy our largest creature, so we can freely sack it and know we're going to have another one to also throw at our opponents. We can also use Stronic Resonator to double up the damage that Ziatora deals, and then Stalking Vengeance is effectively another copy of the Commander, which with them both out leads to us slinging around a ton of damage. Another way of winning the game a bit quicker is by giving Ziatora Infect. With Grafted Exoskeleton equipped to Ziatora, all you need is one 10/10 creature to fling at an opponent, and then it's lights out. Lastly, we can also weaponize some of that treasure that we're making, with cards like Reckless Fireweaver, dealing damage when the treasure comes into play, and then Mayhem Devil and Nadir's Nightblade, dishing out the damage whenever we use a treasure for mana. And then rounding off the deck with some utility lands, there's a couple of good options that we can go for. I really like Kessig Wolfrun in this deck, as it's a good mana sink that we can use to buff up the power of a creature. Then Rogue's Passage means that our biggest creature, or also our commander, can definitely deal that damage to an opponent. And lastly, we have Command Beacon. This means that we can recast Ziatora from the command zone later on in the game, for one time without having to worry about that command attacks. The rest of your mana base will be very dependent on what you have available to you. We've recently released a video with some advice on building a deck with a budget mana base, which might be of help. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.